Hello, my name is Ruby Messina, and I am presenting From Early World Civilization to Black Philosophers and Thinkers to Afrofuturism. Please enjoy. Let's begin with my first topic Know Thyself, Africa, Early World Civilization. Early world civilization has taught us about women empowerment at an early form of leadership during those times. These leaders went from queenship by marriage to kingship by providing for their people's needs, by building empires with strong economic support through trade, promoting peace, and reigning that peaceful regime for many years. They have strengthened their representation by architecture, art, and culture. Such strengths gave these women a memorable historical honor and reality that have paved a way of change from spiritual perspective to political outcomes, thus establishing motivational aspirations amongst other leaders, including those of Afrofuturism. Knowing thyself expressed the importance of knowing where you come from, meaning culturally. It was a lack of which had occurred from the transatlantic transportation to the development of the New World. It explains why culture plays an importance in society to be able to establish personality. A common difficulty due to being suppressed or repressed, and that comes with lack of education, an occurring obstacle during slavery. Personally, I have learned a lot in regards to my own Caribbean roots, which allows me to vision the instability as well as successions. During the New World achievement, at one time, most of the Caribbean had flourished in riches and gave more support to free slaves. But they first began as the most brutally served beings, with lack of knowledge, stripped away from their homes, living under terrible circumstances and abuse, out of a life to a world foreign to them. Early civilization did try to strip away the foundations of the kingships of many queens using similar powers to underrepresent them and for their work by those that were predominantly male and next in line, taking the crown and ordering their people to destroy their legacies by targeting monuments and hieroglyphs in their names. Early civilizations continued, the first society in the world. That comes to a question, what is Africa? Africa is the cultural center of ancient implications, meaning it is what we call the motherland, a region that has been transformed from ancient culture, from primitive culture to ancient culture to modern day. Includes Egyptian, Mediterranean, English, and French influences. Section 2, or Topic 2, Early Black Philosophers and Thinkers 2. In continuity to the construction of early world civilization, Jim Crow became the power of order used to dictate segregation while trying to bury slavery. In essence, it was a nicer version of slavery. Americans live to strive, W.E.B. Du Bois. Early black philosophy and thinkers concept of black beauty as described in the souls of black folk, beauty that set the ruder souls of his people, a dancing and a singing raised but confusion and doubt to the soul of black artist. From the beauty revealed to him was the sole beauty of a race which his larger audience despised, and he could not articulate the message of another people. Questioning, how does it feel to be a problem? Proof of identity struggles due to depreciation based on the psychological perception of a black individual who is accused for being a different shade of flesh, thus implicitly establishing an insecurity amongst their livelihood or social barriers. In this era, slavery was abolished, but with segregation laws, it undermined the integrity of what freedom stood for, because many black folk had been waiting 300 years of abolishment, resulting in the fight for equality. The identity crisis had become noticed, giving black philosophers and thinkers an opportunity to identify such problems or social practices for a common equal rights purpose. Although most philosophers and thinkers did subject to change by fighting back intellectually, others were either satisfied with being segregated from whites as the ideal form of equal opportunity by being a part of primary driven black folk community as a means to avoid difficulties, and implementing the ideal of home Africa to have a centralized city or town for primarily black people. Many other philosophers and thinkers, also Angela Davis, Alan Leroy Locke, were influencers of our history. Topic 3: Black Lives Matter, Politics, Education, and Economics for Black Liberation and Afrofuturism. What is Afrofuturism? In the modern world, it means African culture, cross culture, generational diversity to structured time, as thinkers and philosophers have created the basis for social community, awareness for self identity, education, economic growth, or stature, and political drive, where activism evolved as a means to promote the First Amendment for freedom. These are examples output in modern day through the arts. Dictionary definition from Oxford Languages states that Afrofuturism, also a noun, is a movement in literature, music, art, etc., featuring futuristic or science fiction themes, which incorporate elements of Black history and culture. Afrofuturism has drawn adherents from across the whole spectrum of the arts. Great examples of these Afrofuturism elements that have been incorporated in throughout futuristic and sci-fi films, for example, are Black Panther. It is an incorporation of the two elements. There are many other sci-fi movies you can look up that also have similar elements. Another one, it's a Netflix series um, that promotes Static Shock, the cartoon. So if you watch Static Shock as a kid, I know there's a series coming out, but there's also um, versions of superheroes that are centered to African American culture and diversity, as well as in the science fiction, as well as this futuristic era of them incorporating historical points into sci-fi futuristic elements. So, moving on, what does this topic consist of? Well, in all, we understand that economically, the conditions of Black people were established by either giving of property or by educational means, and that is the status. Status by privilege or Black privilege was primarily due to giving property after the 1960s, and of course by giving of status by educational means that was established prior to property expansion. So stature does move a long ways. How we see it today as the minority group and the majority group, back in those days, and today, of course, the elements that key point how we are afflicted to society by our wealth is our worth. And there is a level between rich and poor, and your race is Black. And then same for those that are considered living in suffrage, that are white poor or white rich, such as the plantation owners. So what is the in between? The middle class. A lot of privileged Black folk were considered middle class, and that was their form of enrichment. The wealthy were given status by proper educational terms due to intelligence, as I stated again, and that was primarily what was the lack of is intelligence, educational means to understand what is happening, to know how you live or how you can be bought out of a situation, and how to prosper. A quote I found I really liked by Yatasha L. Walkman from AfroFuturism, The World of Black Sci-Fi and Fantasy Culture, states, I'm not saying get rid of those 12 notes. I love what music has done and what it will be. But as a musician who is concerned about music, I say, what's beyond those 12 notes? Some other motivation here: never forget that intelligence rules the world and ignorance carries the burden. Therefore, remove yourself as far as possible from ignorance and seek as far as possible to be intelligent. Marcus Garvey. This is well worth sharing over and over. Why? A lie doesn't become truth. Wrong doesn't become right, and evil doesn't become good. just because it's accepted by a majority. Lastly, we have here by the king himself, violence never brings permanent peace. It solves no social problem. It merely creates new and more complicated ones. Violence is impractical because it is a descending spiral ending and destruction for all. So as you can see, these black philosophers and thinkers are already incorporating the style or the essence of what is happening in their society at different points in their era. And they all state, never forget, always keep this in mind. Um, it doesn't become. So know that lying is not good. Being wrong is not right, and evil is never good. So no, understanding what the problem is, and of course, violence does not solve any problem, and just by using these tactics to educate those that are influenced by them sets the tone for Afrofuturism in the future, because it is now educating society in the future at a different time period to do the same, to never forget. Don't be dumb. Intelligence is important. Education is important. Um, Lying does never make it good. And violence is never the answer. And you can hear this projected in many songs, many music and R&B and hip hop influence today. A lot of lyricists, they keep it truthful. So when it is said a lie doesn't become the truth, a lyricist is trained to always speak the truth. And you hear that influenced in the music of today's time. Here are also books that you can look. Becoming Black is a good one. Black on Both Sides, A Racial History of Trans Identity, and The Polished Hoe by Austin Clarke is another good one to read. Now, each and every one is different here, because with Afrofuturism, you have a lot that is talked about outside the box. So, more people speak on to it about it, and it is utilized in a modern day, or more like a futuristic look of modern day time. So, Becoming Black is creating the identity and the African diaspora, and going back to identity, The Polished Hoe also talks about identity from the woman perspective, the black woman perspective, which is great, since we had just talked about early black civilization and how there are women of power that were seen as goddesses, and how time has changed, not just from a racial standpoint, but from a gender standpoint as well. And now we have multi genders to think of. So, despite the ones, despite the uh, gender that we are born by, but how we identify ourselves by. And that is all, folks. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed.